Hello and welcome, I'm Joshua Barnes and you're watching NewsX World. Let's first take a look at our top stories. The White House announces that President Trump will leave the G7 summit early amid ongoing tensions between Israel and Iran. Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney opened the summit in Kananaskis, Alberta, as leaders hold pivotal bilateral talks amid rising global uncertainty. While speaking at the summit, US President Trump warned that everyone should immediately leave Tehran amid escalating military action and rhetoric from both countries. French President Emmanuel Macron says that the US has made an offer to meet with the Iranians while stating European nations are ready for a role in nuclear talks. Macron also points towards potential US sanctions on Russia. Meanwhile, Iran has vowed to continue retaliatory strikes across Israel into the morning as explosions are heard in Tehran. Iran has threatened action against third-party nation involvement as Benjamin Netanyahu says killing Iran's supreme leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei will end the war. President Trump and UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer hold a joint press conference after a bilateral meeting with the US leader stating a trade deal between the nations is done. Meanwhile, Donald Trump has held further trade-related bilaterals with Canadian Prime Minister Mark Carney, who says he is aiming for a deal in 30 days. Trump also spoke with Japanese leader Shigeru Ishiba ahead of the 8th of July US tariff deadline. Well, we are following breaking developments out of the Middle East tonight. US President Donald Trump has cut short his trip to Canada for the G7 summit and will be returning to the United States. Fox News is reporting that the US President has called for the National Security Council to be prepared in the White House Situation Room amid escalating tensions across the Middle East. Meanwhile, the Chinese embassy in Israel has issued an urgent warning to its citizens, stating that the security situation has become more severe. In a rare and strongly worded advisory, the embassy is urging Chinese nationals to evacuate immediately, recommending land border crossings into Jordan as the safest option. The situation remains extremely fluid, and these diplomatic signals reflect growing international concern over a potential regional escalation. That regional escalation could also have wider geopolitical ramifications. Let's give you some context on this. Of course, on Friday, we saw strikes from Israel targeting large areas across Iran, targeting military and nuclear facilities. This on the 61st day of a 60-day deadline given by the US to Iran over agreeing a nuclear deal. Iran have responded and both countries have been continuing their attacks ever since. And this information from Donald Trump, as rhetoric has also continuing that escalation. Well, joining us to discuss all of these developments is Daniel Wagner, the CEO of Country Risk Solutions, who is joining us from Colorado. Daniel, let's first look at this announcement from the White House stating that Donald Trump is leaving the G7 summit early. Is this a signal of quite how perilous the situation in the Middle East is and how serious these escalations have been?
Certainly could be an indication of that. I think there's plenty of discord among the G7 about exactly how this war should be prosecuted, whether it should be ramped up or whether it should be ended as quickly as possible. I thought it was interesting that Trump had suggested to the residents of Tehran that they leave Tehran. That certainly suggests that there's more to come. And of course, Mr. Netanyahu has said much the same. And with Iran promising that they're going to be unleashing the greatest barrage of missiles ever seen in history on Israel in the coming hours, I think there's little doubt that this is going to continue for some time to come.
Yes, Daniel, it seems that the rhetoric is moving towards a potential crescendo in escalations. Sirens have been heard across Israel in recent hours. Warnings and risks of strikes on civilian areas continuing. We've also had explosions reported in Tehran, a continuation of that activity. Is this really the tipping point, do you think, Daniel, in which direction this war and conflict goes? If there is US support, then we know the Israeli military, which is already far superior to the Iranian one, could target all of the sites in which they wanted to. Do you think that's where this is going?
Well, I'm not sure I would characterize it as the tipping point. I would suggest perhaps that it's a tipping point. The escalation is going to reach unprecedented proportions. The question is the U.S. going to join along? You know, there's a lot of division in America as well among legislators about which way this war should go. A lot of people are very hesitant for America to get involved in yet another Middle Eastern conflict, and yet they understand that this is the opportunity to stop Iran in its tracks vis-a-vis its nuclear program. There's not going to be a better opportunity than this. And yet we know that the Israelis can't do the job 100% without either American support or American materiel in order to do it, because they don't have the bunker buster bombs. But the question also is, do they have the capability themselves to deliver them? I don't know the answer to that, actually. But I think that when push comes to shove, if Trump had to make a choice, his inclination would be to enter the war, because he understands that this is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity. He understands that probably only the Americans can do what needs to be done to totally end Iran's program for nuclear weapons. The Israelis, they're doing a great job for what it is they're attempting to do, but they can only go so far without that kind of information and that kind of materiel.
Yes, absolutely. And Daniel, we have seen and heard that US military assets are moving into the region. We also had a few days ago, before Israel launched this unprecedented action across Iran, that personnel were being moved away from the Middle East. This is in line with a potential escalation. Do you think that the US movement of military assets is just for protection, or could this be citing, as we've already spoken about, clearer US involvement?
Well, U.S. involvement doesn't necessarily need to come from a carrier strike group. It could come from any number of the bases around Iran, which the U.S. maintains. And of course, those could ultimately become targets for Iran. If Iran perceived that that was going to be the case, my guess is they would want to try to preempt it. But I find myself wondering, just how strong or weak is Iran at this point? Their air defenses have been decapitated. They have shown that they have some muscularity in terms of their ability to attack Israel. But with all of their military leadership basically killed, and with so much of their air defenses decapitated, and with so much of their offensive capabilities already deployed, one has to wonder just how much capability they have.
Yes, absolutely. Also joining us once again on our programming tonight or this morning, depending on where you are in the world, is Adrian Calamel, a terrorism scholar, who is joining us from New York. Adrian, Trump requesting that the National Security Council be prepared in the Situation Room. How telling is that move that will be carried out and will take place once he returns this evening, US time?
Thank you for having me back, Joshua. It's definitely been an interesting day. I would have to say that this is all related to the one site, Fordo. It's related to, you see movements, ship movements, as well as what's being moved on those ships, as well as flight patterns, and it looks like we're in a forward type position. So it didn't. You can never predict what's going to happen with a conflict like this, but Israel has shown with overwhelming ability to quickly take control of the situation. But there was that one obstacle that people like me were always concerned about, was Fordo. Can they hit it? And the issue is that with that is, and why that has to be taken off the table, is because the regime and Ali Khamenei, and it'll be passed down to his son Moshtaba, are great at making those tactical retreats. And if they can just survive, hold on for survival, and factor in some way of holding on to Fordo, that's what they will try and do. That's why it needs to be taken away. And then that's what the next, I think, peace deal or whatever Trump will put before them. It's, it's really in Khamenei's hands. It's whether he wants to completely dismantle his entire nuclear program, enrichment and reprocessing capabilities.
Yes, Adrian, if Fordo is targeted with an American bunker buster bomb, what response can we expect from Iran, as Daniel also suggested and mentioned? They have threatened that these strikes into the morning will be the biggest barrage against Israel in history. Fordo has been seen as somewhere out of reach just for Israel. Of course, if there was US involvement, they know it could be hit. But would this be an escalation above all? And how might that Iranian response be?
I don't think it'll. I think we're seeing what they have got in their arsenal. And Khamenei said if there was an attack, there would be a launch of 1,000 missiles. That didn't happen. That might have been hyperbole, but it's been 50 here, 50 there. It hasn't been the all-out barrage that he had said. Now, some have inflicted some damage, but they just don't. And the other thing I want to talk about is other capabilities. Like, people have mentioned that they have hypersonic capabilities. They just don't. Unless they got those abilities from Russia and China, and I just don't see that happening. So I don't know what the response is going to be. I would expect it's going to be more of the same, ballistic missile barrage of a diminishing stockpile.
Yes, you mentioned there, Adrian, Russia and China. I'll come on to Russia shortly, but first, Daniel, let's have a look at some of these statements that have come from the Chinese embassy in Israel, warning citizens that the security situation has become more severe, recommending citizens to leave via land crossings towards Jordan. Is this potential Chinese intelligence saying that something is coming and something big? And also, I'm interested by the fact that they're suggesting land crossings towards Jordan, being very specific in the mode of transport out of Israel and the specific route to take. What are your thoughts?
Well, if you're wanting to leave Israel right now, you don't have a lot of options because the airport has been closed and the air traffic has been severely curtailed. So if you want to leave Israel, you basically have to go either by sea or by land. By sea isn't a particularly safe route, and by land is really the only option. And then where are you going to go? You're not going to go the northern route through Lebanon or Syria. You're going to have to basically go through Jordan. So I think they're basically left with little choice. It is telling that the Chinese are saying this at this time. I would have thought they're a little bit late to the party, if you will. I would have thought that they would have suggested that at about the same time that the Americans and the Brits and the Europeans did in terms of getting their diplomats and non-essential personnel out of there. So I'm not sure I would attribute too much to that. I think it's also worth noting that there's a lot of damage being done in Israel. I was texting with a friend in Israel earlier today, and she suggested that not nearly everything that is being damaged is being noted in the press. So I think that 10, 15, 20% of the missiles that are getting through from Iran are doing pretty substantial damage.
Yes, and Adrian, I will come back to you to discuss Russia. Of course, that alliance with Iran is a strong one. Do you think that there may be any Russian involvement if the US get involved? Although we have seen a warming of relations, a warming of frosty relations since Trump took office for a second time.
It's interesting. It's a great question. It's been a very interesting relationship, the one tracking it over the years between the Islamic Republic and Russia. And I'll just look in this last decade or so. Especially when you look at 2015, there starts to be, and even before that, but 2015 is when all of a sudden, Russia comes in, helps out the Russians with the Islamic Republic with the Syrian civil war, and they established their two ports on the Mediterranean, and it looked like their sphere of influence was there. And then the Islamic Republic kept on asking for things, and it seemed like Russia was kind of done with that relationship, like frustrated by it. And then all of a sudden the Ukraine war kicked off, and then eventually, to a lot of people's surprise, and it did happen, Russia ran into a firepower problem. So then they turned back to the Islamic Republic for ballistic missiles, drones, those things that they're using in the war right now. Look at what happened with Assad. Right now, is Russia really? At first I thought with Assad, they may come to his defense, but they'll probably just let him fall. And here I'm seeing a situation where Putin's calculating. He's saying, "Can I make deals or make good with whatever may come in next, and kind of hedge my bets here?"
Yes, absolutely. We have some breaking news to bring you, if you can both stay with us. An update from Tehran, and an employee of Iran's state broadcaster has been killed following an Israeli strike that we reported earlier, showing you those visuals as well of a news anchor on air as that strike happened. We've heard an update that Masoumeh Azimi, who worked in the administrative offices at the Iranian TV headquarters, died after a blast wave from the strike hit the broadcast complex. Iranian officials confirmed her death and say multiple parts of the national TV compound were damaged. This comes as well after Iran themselves issued evacuation warnings for Israeli media sites. This is something that is continuing to develop, and we will keep that in the forefront of our mind as we move to another ongoing conflict, this time away from the Middle East, into Europe. And we've had reports of a combined Russian drone and missile attack which has struck Kyiv overnight. This has reportedly left at least 20 people wounded, according to Ukrainian officials, the latest in a series of mass drone and missile strikes on the capital came as world leaders gathered for the Group of Seven summit in Canada, where Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky is expected to arrive soon and attend discussions. Kyiv Mayor Vitaly Klitschko reported that 9 people were injured in the Sviatoshny district and another 11 in the Solomyansky district, with 6 hospitalized. Fires also erupted in 2 other districts due to debris from Ukrainian air defences intercepting the attacks. Let's have a listen to the sirens wailing in the Ukrainian capital. Well, that the ongoing situation in Kyiv, the strikes being reported, of course, multiple wars ongoing at once. The Russia-Ukraine conflict was potentially set for more conversation at the G7 summit, but the situation in the Middle East has of course taken the spotlight. Donald Trump announcing, if you are just joining us, that he is leaving this summit early. I'm just going to quickly come to you, please, Daniel, if that's possible, to discuss these strikes in Kyiv. With all of the ongoings in the Middle East since Friday, of course, Kyiv, a key topic, but one that has potentially fallen to the sidelines. But Volodymyr Zelensky is arriving at the G7 summit, and of course will have his own agenda and be looking at potential sanctions. We've heard from President Emmanuel Macron at the G7 summit about that, and said that Trump has signalled that there is potential for the Senate to move forward with sanctions. Given the ongoing action, how important is it that Western allies are united in the face of uncertainty across continents? Well, I believe we have lost Daniel. So, Adrian, if I can throw that question to you.
Yeah, that's a difficult question. It was always going to be doubtful whether Zelensky was going to be able to move the needle at this summit when he comes and meets with Trump. We've seen the way this has gone. I'm glad that he's there. I'm glad that he's shoring up that European support, and he just has to really understand that. And I think this what Trump needs to understand is that Putin really isn't interested in peace, and I think he really does have a desire to kind of reshape the global order and kind of pull Russia into an American orbit and away from China. And a way to do that is to continue to placate Putin. And then he's threatened him multiple times, saying, we got to stop this. But Putin continues to launch drones, missiles at civilian populations, and it really isn't any different than what the Islamic Republic does, except for the Islamic Republic was on the precipice of a nuclear weapon, and they are the world's largest state sponsor of terror. And then the other problem with Trump, I would say, his foreign policy is not connecting the two. Looking at, I did say the relationship between the Islamic Republic and Russia was strained. But they did sign that strategic relationship that you alluded to in just this January. So he's got to, navigate these waters carefully. And I wonder if we come to a point where he says, okay, I've had enough of Putin. He clearly isn't playing ball. It's just kind of a stalling action by Trump to try and get that resolved, thought he could, and decided to go for the low-hanging fruit, which is the Islamic Republic, because let's face it, they're the weakest out of all the three adversaries that the United States faces when you rank them, going from the Islamic Republic to Moscow to Beijing.
Adrian Calamel, thank you once again for joining us on this night of significant development in the Middle East and also in North America. I also want to thank Daniel Wagner for being here with us. We will be back very soon with more updates from Alberta and any further updates we get from the Middle East.